The British labour market has been declining sharply since the Brexit referendum. Even if you look at some numbers, you wouldn't believe this. But this particularly affects jobs whose earnings are below the average annual income of £35,150. And this means that the effects of the vote primarily affect low earners and job starters, which include younger people in particular. This is the result of a recent labour market analysis by the job search engine Adzuna, which examined 13.37 million vacancies in the UK that were listed on Adzuna from 2016 to 2018. According to this, the British labour market had a total of 924,100 fewer jobs advertisements in 2018 than 16. And jobs for low-income earners recorded the largest deficit with 68.5%. And I know after I said those numbers, many of you will say, today is a lot of different things have happened with the people leaving, others coming, and so on. We still have a lot of open jobs. Yes, you still have a lot of open jobs, but much less applicants. But this video is about what happened right after the Brexit vote. And so the younger voters that either were not allowed to vote yet or did not go to the vote were immediately affected after the vote. And that's what I want to talk about in this video today, because some people forget what happened in the past. And that's why I sometimes bring back this stuff, like I did with the leave orders that happened immediately when Brexit happened, officially after the transition period, I mean. So the major impact of Brexit was there, and some other things as well. And that's why I want to talk about what happened to the people, especially the younger people, in the 2 years after the vote, because this is still having an effect today. So 68.5% of all lost advertisements were for jobs with wages of less than 30,000 a year. In the higher income bracket, however, the decline was much weaker at the time. The proportion of lost advertisements with an annual income between £30,000 and £40,000 and £40,000 and £50,000 was 12% each. The proportionate deficit for jobs earning more than £50,000 a year was even lower, at just 7.8%. So compared to Germany, job advertisements in Great Britain are provided with salary information, which enables the job offer to be analyzed in terms of wages. And that study by Adzuna, which deals with the labor market development for European employees, came to the conclusion that the proportion of job offers, for example, for German-speaking employees, had fallen by a total of 22% since 2016. And the effects were even more noticeable in London as a business location. Since the referendum in the English capital, almost every third advertisement for people who speak German has disappeared. And I still get some because they still have my email address from the past, but yeah. But the situation is even worse for Spanish or French-speaking workers. The proportion of job advertisements with Spanish as a language requirements fell by 39.5%. The ads for French even increased by 44%. And the ongoing political uncertainty since 2016 has had a lasting impact on the British labour market at the time. The strong decline in the lower wage bracket affected young people in particular, who were usually still among the low earners when they start their careers. And as part of the reduction in job vacancies, European employees were of course also affected, who have always had a competitive advantage on the British labour market due to their language skills. And based on their results, the job opportunities were also getting smaller in that case. Consider, however, the UK's strong starting position when it comes to a multicultural job market. Although strong declines can be noted there, London still had offers of 3,000 current job offers that require German language skills. Only 300 were recorded at the same time in Paris or Amsterdam. And even if overall supply appeared to be declining, the labour market for foreign language workers continued to outperform that of other EU countries. But it was an issue. And now I want to jump a bit further, because that's not the only thing people are worried about, and Michel Barnier has spoken out once again. Because it would be time for London and Brussels to negotiate a new defence and foreign policy cooperation treaty. That's what Michel Barnier, the EU's former chief Brexit negotiator, told Politico. Speaking at the 100th edition of the newsletter, Barnier, the former French presidential candidate and a key player in Britain's arduous divorce from the EU, said it was now in both sides' interest to work together in the face of shared challenges like the war in Ukraine, climate change, and terrorism. Barnier, citing the goodwill built between London and Brussels this year with the signing of a long-awaited deal on with the Windsor framework, he argues we need to build a new type of Britain-EU cooperation. During talks in 2020 over the post-Brexit UK-EU trade deal known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, then Prime Minister Boris Johnson decided not to negotiate a security deal with the European Union. And that despite the fact that such a plan was part of the political declaration Johnson signed a few months earlier. The UK claimed there were opportunities for cooperation on issues such as defence without formal contractual obligations. That refusal was probably for political reasons, but I think it was a mistake, said Barnier, who led the EU negotiating team for the TCA and the previous EU-UK withdrawal agreement. And now I think it's time, given the situation in Africa, the war in Ukraine, the new challenges for our security and the stability of the continent, I think it would be in our common interest to have an agreement to negotiate new defence, foreign affairs, foreign policy and cooperation treaty between the UK and the EU, Barnier says. The Financial Times reported over the weekend that the UK had turned down an offer from the EU for formal cooperation on global issues. An idea, the paper said, was floated by European Council President Charles Michel. But the UK seems enthusiastic about the idea of reviving defence cooperation with the Union, despite some concerns from conservative Brexit supporters. A British minister announced in June that Brussels and London had reached consensus on the majority of an agreement for the UK to join a military project under the EU's Defence Coordination Group, known as the Permanent Structured Cooperation. While holidaying on France's Atlantic coast, Barnier, who became a household name across Britain as the country negotiated its exit from the EU, continued to express his regret at Britain's decision to leave the Union. Brexit is an outcome he continues to describe as nonsense and a lose-lose game for Britain and the EU. While proud to have conducted extraordinary negotiations on behalf of Brussels, he noted that the EU has never had to engage in trade talks with a third country to rebuild barriers and not to remove barriers. Under the TCA, 45% of a new electric vehicle, for example, and its part traded cross-border, must be manufactured in the UK or EU, otherwise 10% tariffs apply. And that is one of the things that had to be built up there. But so far, I don't see any positive consequences of leaving the EU, Barnier says. And Barnier stressed that Britain's current difficulties are not all related to Brexit, but are more serious as a result. Though careful not to offer an opinion on what the UK should or should not do next, he said the door is open for Britain to rejoin the EU if it so wishes. Well, I'm not that sure, Barnier. However, he warned that regulatory divergences from the EU, which is free for the UK and is one of the main reasons for Brexit, would only make such a task more difficult, and there I agree with him again. If you've created too much divergence, that could be a problem because you have to reduce that divergence in order to comply with single market rules and standards, he said. A potential new flashpoint for UK-EU relations is already emerging. I mentioned it earlier that as part of the TCA, which Barnier helped negotiate, the rules of origin are important for the manufacture of electric vehicles, and that will be tightened on January 1st. And as I said, 45% of a new electric vehicle and its parts must be made in the UK or the EU. or they will see those 10% tariffs. And these rules will be further tightened in 2027, so next year is not the end of it. And the car industry in both the UK and the EU are calling for enforcement to be postponed. And Kemi Badenoch, the UK's Business and Trade Secretary, has pressed her EU counterpart over the imminent demolition. But Barnier, who has remotely defied the UK's demands, says further tinkering with the rules of origin and financial services in the TCA, which also faces another deadline for EU banks using clearinghouses in London, is unlikely. I think there's no way to get more flexibility on those two issues. No way, he said. The former Brexit negotiator went on to plead for a tweak that he says will ease trade strains between the two sides. One is a veterinary deal between the UK and the EU to facilitate exchanges of animals and also vegetables. It would be a commitment by the opposition British Labour Party if it comes to power. There is a way to improve, facilitate and leverage technology, but there's no way to cherry pick, Barnier says. As a French and European citizen, there you have it, I believe that I will not accept any kind of cherry picking, he says. And when asked if he would like to take part in the mid-decade review of the TCA, Barnier, who is no longer a member of the European Commission, he says, there are many, many competent people in the Commission looking into this. And there he's right. They are negotiating all the time. The Brexit talks remain an extraordinary negotiation for Barnier, but also a negative negotiation, is what he said in an interview later. I still don't understand the added value of Brexit for Britain and for us. Well, Monsieur Barnier, first of all, the British did not decide for Brexit, the ones that did decide for Brexit, I mean, to do anything good to the EU. So I didn't expect any good from Brexit for neither side, but also not for the EU, except that we have one, as we in Germany would say, Querschießer less in the EU. But Brexit will never be a good thing. And as we talked a lot, and there will be a time when the mood in Britain will change. And then he is quite right about this, and some of my longtime viewers wrote the same in the comments already. If Britain wants to return, they have to comply with the 35 protocols in the so-called negotiations. It's not really negotiations, but it's finding out if a country hits the targets of the protocols. And in a lot of them, I don't see Britain being able to do that at the moment. So if Britain would decide today to rejoin the EU, there would be a lot of work to be done before they even can. It would be impossible for current Britain to rejoin the EU, that's for sure. And something I have to add, because there was a lot now going on because of for example, of the video I made on the leave orders from the Netherlands for Britons, and I quickly have to say something for my Dutch viewers, and I have to remember that. Ik kan allemaal een beetje Nederlands verstaan, maar ik kan niet heel goed Nederlands praten. So don't expect me to say anything useful in the future in the Dutch language. Sorry to the others, but my Dutch viewers will know what I try to say at least. I'm not that far from the Dutch border, but Dutch was not on my schedule in school, I'm sorry. But I can read it. That's the fun, because it's very similar to Plattdeutsch here. That's kind of an old dialect, and so I can read Dutch newspapers, and that's why I said I can understand easier in writing than in hearing, but I cannot speak. I knew a few things, how things are pronounced from my short time with the military in the Netherlands, but when I was stationed there. But it's a long time ago, and so you lose stuff. But it was fun, and thank you for all the compliments in the videos when I just try to pronounce the residence permit, or what it was in the Netherlands video. So thank you very much for that. And I always try to do my best when I'm trying to pronounce the things in other languages. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.